Some heroes don't carry guns, they carry scars that no one sees. And sometimes, all it takes is a cook to remind trained soldiers how to survive. At Phoenix Base, where elite units returned for supplies, there was a woman no one paid much attention to: Julia Rains. She wasn't in uniform. She had no badges, no rank, just a quiet smile, soft voice, and a habit of waking at 4 a.m. to make meals for soldiers who rarely remembered her name. Most of them called her Miss Sandwich, half mockery, half habit. She moved through the base like a ghost. Always present, never seen, delivering meals to the medbay, refilling coffee in briefing rooms, cleaning trays in silence. The only thing odd about her, that silver chain she never took off. It had an old dog tag, the letters worn out from years of wear. No one knew why she kept it. Rumors flew. Some said it belonged to an old flame. Others joked she used to cook on the front lines, nothing serious, just teasing. But that quiet morning, something happened. She stepped into the operation room with a tray full of sandwiches, just as the big screen lit up with live drone footage. Bravo unit trapped under ambush. Gunfire, smoke, blood. A lieutenant whistled when he saw her. Our sandwich specialist reporting for duty. Everyone chuckled until Julia froze mid-step, her eyes locked on the screen and her tray shook. In her hands, "That's my unit," she said, almost inaudibly. Silence crashed into the room. She took one step closer to the screen, eyes scanning the live feed. One soldier wounded, crawling under fire, caught her attention. She didn't blink. "That man, Evans," she said. "I carried him out of Fogel when he was bleeding from the gut." Lofton, the lieutenant colonel, narrowed his eyes. "Hup, do you know that name?" Julia reached up, unclasped the chain from her neck, and held up the tag. "Rains JRCN 457, Tactical Recovery, Raven 9. An audible gasp spread through the room. An assistant tapped furiously on the system, pulling. "Old files, sir. She was Raven 9, Tactical Recovery." That unit was disbanded after Hill 17. The room changed. The air changed. The air changed. Julia stood still. "I'm the last one left," she said, voice firm. "And that man on the screen is one I already saved once." Number 1 laughed anymore, and no one dared interrupt when she stepped up to the map. Every officer in that room had trained for war, but none of them had ever seen someone like Julia Rains take command without saying a word. She pointed to the map. "You're reading it wrong," she said. "Those new satellite overlays, clean, but they're useless." The screen showed modern routes, neat paths, digital overlays, green zones and red zones, perfect on paper. But Julia had walked those valleys when they were soaked in blood. She had crawled through those rocks, while bullets ripped through the air. She'd dragged bodies through those woods when medevac never came. Her finger traced a different path, a forgotten one, the Northern Stone Tunnel. It was used during the old recovery ops. "It's not on any modern map, but it's the only way they make it out alive." "Who gave you clearance to speak?" one officer asked. "I don't need clearance," Julia replied, unflinching. "I've been there. I remember every minefield, every echo point, every sniper ridge." A junior lieutenant spoke hesitantly. "You want to go?" She looked him in the eye. "No, I need to go." Lofton stared at her. He could see it. Now beneath the cook's apron was someone forged in battle. A survivor. A protector. He nodded slowly. "You're cleared for departure," he said. "Temporary permissions granted. Whatever you need, take it." Julia turned without a word. Back in the barracks, she pulled open an old locker. Doosty sealed inside her gear. Faded tactical pants, old combat boots, a holster with an M9 pistol. She cleaned it silently, her hands remembering movements she'd sworn she'd never make again. She clipped the old tag back to her chest, then stepped aboard a waiting chopper. No fanfare, no squad, just her memory, and the fire in her blood. As the rotors lifted and the valley disappeared below. Julia's mind was already ahead, charting terrain, scanning threats, recalling ghosts. And somewhere far ahead, Evans was bleeding again, and Julia was on her way. The valleys below looked quiet to quiet, but Julia knew better. Every patch of trees, every ridgeline, every shadow told a story. She had walked these mountains before, when they echoed with screams, when fire lit the night sky and silence only meant death was near. Now, years later, she returned alone. Through dense forests, over broken rocks. She moved without sound, like a ghost, half memory, half mission. The radio on her vest crackled faintly. "Bravo team. Under fire. Evans down, requesting support." Anyone? No one responded. No one, except her. "This is Ghost 7, she whispered into the mic. "I'm en route. Hold position." Ghost 7. Her old call sign, unused for years, but when she spoke those words, it was like she had never left. Found them deep in the red zone. 3 men, pinned down behind broken trees. 1 unconscious. Evans breathing, barely. The third, his hands shaking on his rifle. Julia didn't hesitate. She crouched low, scanning the tree. She saw the glint of scopes, but none trained on her. She knew how to move blind to the enemy. Every muscle remembered. She reached Evans first. His blood-soaked sleeve told her everything she needed. A tourniquet, pressure, quick assessment. "You're not dying today," she muttered. "Evans," she said, gripping his shoulder. "You remember me?" His eyes fluttered open. He blinked. "Rains," she nodded once. "Told you I'd bring you home." He tried to smile, then passed out. The third soldier tried to speak, but she cut him off. "Help me with him. Quiet. No panic." She pulled out the hand-drawn map she'd kept tucked in her vest. Every landmark etched from memory. Every movement calculated. The extraction point was 2 kilometers east, but through enemy-controlled terrain, and still not a single bullet was fired. Because Julia didn't take roads. She took ghost paths. They moved under branches, through dry riverbeds, behind broken ruins she remembered from her first deployment. Not a single sensor picked them up, because even the tech didn't know these paths existed. Julia didn't speak much. Only when it mattered. "Stop, eyes left. Sentry above ridge. Wait 12 seconds, move on my mark." The other 2 followed her like she was born from the rocks. At one point, they passed a small stone marker. Julia paused just a moment, enough to remember it was where her squad had made their last stand during Hill 17, where she had buried 2 teammates, where the silence afterward had lasted years. She didn't say anything, just pressed on. 20 minutes later, the extraction zone came into view. Evans was slipping. The other soldier had started praying under his breath, but Julia wasn't done. She climbed the last ridge, scouted the LZ, then signaled with her radio. "This is Ghost 7. Package secured. Need extraction now. Hot zone clear." The reply came instantly. "Copy that. Bird is inbound. ETA 2 minutes." When the helicopter touched down, kicking up dirt and leaves, medical personnel rushed out. Evans was carried off on a stretcher. Before the medics could fully cover his face, he grabbed Julia's hand weakly. "I never forgot," he whispered. "You saved me." Again, Julia just smiled. "I keep my promises." And then she disappeared into the trees again, not because she was running, but because she knew what came next wasn't glory or applause. It was the hardest part, the return. The helicopter thundered into the sky, carrying Evans and the others to safety. But Julia stayed quiet in her seat, eyes locked on the ground as the valley faded from view. No celebration, no welcome committee. Just wind in her hair and a heavy silence that felt familiar. At Phoenix Base, she stepped off the aircraft alone. The same apron she once wore was folded neatly in her hands. Her boots were caked in mud, pants torn at the knees, and her shirt streaked with dried blood. Not hers, but someone she refused to leave behind. She didn't report to command. She didn't wait to be debriefed. Instead, she walked straight back to the kitchen. "Julia," an assistant asked wide-eyed. "You're back how?" She gave a small, tired smile. "They're safe now. I just need to wash my hands." She turned on the tap and scrubbed the blood from her fingers, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just rewritten protocol with her bare hands. But others had seen it, and everything had changed. The next morning, the command room was full again. Maps projected on the wall. Charts open, officers seated in silence. Julia entered with a tea tray like always, but this time no one spoke, no one dared. Lofton stood slowly, holding something in his hand. "This," he said, placing it on the table, "is the new extraction protocol proposed by our kitchen staff." No chuckles. No raised eyebrows, only stillness. He pulled something from his chest pocket, a badge worn, weathered, unmistakable. Raven 9. He laid it gently on the table. "The only person who wore this just saved an entire unit," he said. Julia stood silently at the doorway. She didn't step forward. She didn't reach for the badge. "I didn't come back for awards," she said. "I came back because someone called for help. And when that happens, we answer." A young officer, the same one who once mocked her, stood up flustered. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you," he said. "I didn't know." Julia nodded gently. "You know now. That's enough." She looked around the room, at the very maps she had helped redraw, at the men and women who now looked at her not with doubt, but with something deeper. Respect, not the kind written into rank, the kind that's earned through action. As she turned to leave, she paused at the doorway, then looked back over her shoulder. "And gentlemen, next time you see someone in an apron, remember they might be the reason you're still breathing." The door closed behind her with a quiet click, and for a long moment, no one in that room said a word. Lofton picked up the badge, held it in his palm, and looked at his officers. Any further questions about protocol? No one had any. Back in the kitchen, Julia resumed her routine. She chopped vegetables, stirred soup, delivered meals, but something had shifted. Every soldier who came to eat now knew the truth, that the woman behind the counter was a ghost from a forgotten war, the last of Raven 9, the one who had disappeared into the hills to save a team left for dead and returned as if nothing happened. The silver tag around her neck now glinted in full view, no longer hidden, worn with quiet pride. Asterisk, she didn't return for medals. She didn't seek glory. She just needed to know when someone calls for help, someone answers. Because not all heroes wear rank. Some wear aprons. And sometimes that's the difference between life and death.